Hello listeners, this video will discuss A Tale of Two Cities written by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, he was an English writer and social critic. His full name is Charles John Hopham Dickens. He was born in the year 1812 and died in the year 1870. He is regarded as the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. He has created best fictional characters in his works. During his lifetime, he did not attain fame, but only during 20th century, many critics and scholars, they recognized him as a literary genius. Most of his works depicts early Victorian London. His popular works are his 1843 novella, A Christmas Carol. Novella means a short novel or a long short story. Oliver Twist, Great Expectation. His 1859 novel, A Tale of Two Cities, is set in London and Paris. This novel is a best known work of historical fiction. His other works include The Pickwick Papers, which he published in the year 1836, Nicholas Nickleby, published as a serial from 1838 to 1839. David Copperfield is a novel. This was first published as a serial in 1849 and 1850. Then it became a book in the same year, 1850. Bleak House, this was published between 1852 and 1853. Little Dorrit, published between 1855 and 1857. Let us see an overview of the novel A Tale of Two Cities. This is an historical novel published in 1859. This novel is set in London and Paris, which was before and during the French Revolution. This novel is one of the best-selling novels of all time. In 2003, this novel was ranked in 63rd on the BBC's The Big Read poll. The novel was also adapted for film, television, radio, and stage performance, and also it continues to influence popular culture. The novel tells the story of the French Doctor Manette. Manette was imprisoned for a long period, around 18 years, in Bastille in Paris, and it revolves around his release to live in London with his daughter Lucie, whom he had never met. The story is set up to French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. Reign of Terror was a period of the French Revolution which follows the creation of the First Republic. At this time, there were many series of massacres and numerous public executions took place. Writer Donald Yugi Amaza, he is an American fantasy science fiction writer. He, in the book Introduction to the Encyclopedia of Adventure Fiction, says that this novel, A Tale of Two Cities, is an adventure novel because the protagonists are in constant danger of being imprisoned or killed. Charles Dickens has produced this novel into 3 books and it has 15 chapters. This lecture will have the entire plot summary of the novel. Let us first see the characters. Charles Darnay, otherwise called as Charles Evermont. Charles makes his own living by abandoning his position in the French aristocracy. He belongs to a French noble family. He was between 20 to 25. Dr. Alexander Manette, he is a French physician who gets imprisoned in the Bastille. Over his imprisonment, he loses his mind. He experiences psychological trauma of persecution from tyranny. Meaning of tyranny is cruel and unfair use of power by a person. Lucie Manette, she is the daughter of Charles Manette. She has a quality of innocence and abiding love to her father. She believes that she has a power to resurrect or to recall her father back to life. Sidney Carton, during his youth, he lost the women that he loved. At present, he is a drunkard and a lawyer who takes no credit for his work. Monsieur Defert, he is a former servant of Dr. Manette. Defog uses his Paris wine shop as a place to organize French revolutionaries. Madame de Fogg, wife of Monsieur de Fogg. She assists the revolutionaries. Jerry Cruncher. He is a porter and messenger for Tellson's Bank and a secret resurrection man. Mrs. Cruncher, who's the wife of Jerry Cruncher and the mother of young Jerry. Mrs. Cruncher is a faithful woman who always prays constantly. Young Jerry, the son of Jerry Cruncher and Mrs. Cruncher. Young Jerry is very curious to know about his father's work at night. Marquis Saint Evermont, who's Charles' uncle and a cruel French aristocrat, he is committed to preserving the power of the French nobility. Mr. Jarvis Lorry, he is an older gentleman who works for Tellson's Bank. Mr. Stryver, he is a lawyer who defends Charles Darnay. John Bursard, he is otherwise called as Solomon Pross. He is a brother of Miss Pross. At first, he is a spy for English and then he becomes the spy for the French government. Jacques III. Jacques is the code name for every male revolutionary. Those revolutionaries identify themselves by number. Jacques III is a cruel, bloodthirsty man who represents the corruption of the revolution's idol. The Vengeance. This is a peasant woman from Paris. She has a close association with Madame de Fogg. Both Madame de Fogg and Jacques III, they enjoy killing others for their own sake. Similar to them, the Vengeance also enjoys killing for its own sake. The Mender of Roads or the Wood Sawyer. He is a French working man who represents how average people become seduced by the worst and most violent qualities of the revolution. Gabble is a servant of Charles Evermont who carries out Charles' secret charities. Roger Clive, he is a spy and colleague of John Bursard who faked his death to escape prosecution. Miss Pross, she is a long-time devoted servant of Lucie Mante. She is a sister of Solomon Pross. She hates French people. Montchagner, he is a powerful French aristocrat. Let us see the summary of the novel. The novel starts in the year 1775. Jerry Cruncher, he is an employee of Tellson's Bank in London. He flags down the nightly mail coach en route from London to Dover. Dover is a town in Kent, southeast England. On his journey, he carries a message for Jarvis Lorry. He is one of the bank's managers. Lorry sends Jerry a message that says recalled to life, which refers to Alexander Mante. He is a French physician who has been released from the Bastille after an 18-year imprisonment. On his arrival in Dover, Lorry meets Dr. Mante's daughter, Lucie, and her governess named Miss Pross. Lucie believes that her father is dead, but when she hears from Lorry that her father is still alive, she faints. Jarvis Lorry takes her to France for a reunion with her father. In Paris, around the neighborhood of Paris, there is a place named Faubourg Saint-Antoine. Here, Dr. Mante is given lodgings by his former servant Ernest de Fogg and his wife Theresa. The couple are the owners of a wine shop. Jarvis Lorry and Lucie, the daughter of Dr. Mante, they meet him in a small garret where he spends much of his time by making shoes. This shoemaking skill he learnt in prison. Jarvis Lorry and Lucie, they take him back to England. When the second book starts, it was in the year 1780. The French Charles Darnay, he belongs to an aristocrat family. He is on trial in London for treason against the British crown. Treason meaning the criminal act of causing harm to a country. There were two British spies against him. They are John Bursard and Roger Clive. Lucie and her father, Dr. Manette, they happened to meet Darnay during their return from France. Sidney Carton wins the case against Mr. Stryver. Mr. Stryver is a defense lawyer. Having Bathsa's testimony, Carton claims that Darnay is not guilty of a crime. In Paris, Marquis Saint Evermont, he is a hatred and abusive man. He orders his carriage to drive recklessly fast through the crowded streets. His carriage hits a child. Marquis throws a coin to the father's child, who is gasped in order to compensate the child's loss. Again, when Marquis drives, a coin is flung back into the carriage. He arrives at his country chateau. Chateau is a manor house, that's a residence of the lord of the manor. There, Marquis meets his nephew and heir Darnay. His nephew is Charles Darnay, who's called as Charles Evermont. But Darnay, though he belongs to aristocratic family, he is ashamed to carry his surname Saint Evermont and thus takes his mother's maiden name Darnay. That night, Gaspard, who is the father of the child who is killed by Marquis, he creeps inside the chateau and stabs and kills the Marquis when he is asleep. For a year, Gaspard escaped from the capture but is eventually hanged in the nearby village. In London, Sidney Carton, he confesses his love to Lucie but quickly recognizes that she cannot love him in return. Carton also promises that he will take any step to embrace her love out of any sacrifice in order to gain her love. Charles Darnay, he asks Dr. Manette's permission in order to wed Lucie, and Manette agrees. On the morning of the wedding, Darnay reveals his real name. He says that he belongs to an aristocrat family. The revelation of Darnay makes Dr. Manette get obsessive with his shoemaking. The couple Lucie and Darnay, they move to their honeymoon, but Lucie is unaware of the whole incident. As the years pass, Lucie and Charles, they raise their family in London. They get a son who died in childhood and then a daughter named Little Lucie. Jarvis Lorry visits them, also Sidney Carton visits them often, and he becomes a close friend and a special favorite of Little Lucie. In Paris in the year 1789 July, the defoggers, they help to lead the storming of the Bastille, which is a symbol of royal tyranny. The defog, they enter Dr. Manette's former cell, which is number 105. They search the cell thoroughly, and throughout the countryside, many officials and other representatives of the aristocracy are slaughtered, and Saint Evermont Chauty is burnt to the ground. Followed to this in the year 1792, Jarvis Lorry, he traveled to France in order to save the important documents of Tellson's bank. He moves to Paris branch and wanted to save the documents from the chaos of the French Revolution. Darnay receives a letter from Gably. Gably is one of his uncle's former servants who is imprisoned by the revolutionaries. He is pleading for the Marquis. Marquis meaning a person who belongs to nobleman ranking. So he calls for a Marquis to help secure his release. Darnay, without informing his family or informing about his position as a new Marquis, he moves to Paris. The third book starts. As Darnay arrived in France, he is denounced as an illegal emigrator aristocrat and he is put into prison in La Force prison. In order to save Darnay, Dr. Manette, his daughter Lucie, and her daughter Jerry, along with Miss Pross, they all move to Paris and take lodgings near where Lorry stayed. 15 months later, Darnay is finally released, and Dr. Manette is seen as a popular hero who has fought against long imprisonment in the Bastille. However, Darnay is rearrested later that day. Miss Pross, while she had a walk for a shop with little Jerry, She is amazed to see her long-lost brother, Solomon. Solomon, he poses as a Frenchman. He is an employee of the revolutionary authorities and he is one of Darnay's gaolers. Gaolers means a person whose job is to guard prisoners. Sidney Carton also recognizes him as Bastille. Bastille is the one who spied against Darnay at his trial in 1780. At first, Solomon is desperate to keep his true identity hidden, but after Carton threatens him, he reveals his English identity. Carton also blackmails Solomon into helping him with a plan. The De Fogs also found a manuscript at Dr. Manette's prison cell. They read the manuscript to the tribunal. Tribunal means a type of authority to decide who is right in particular types of dispute or disagreement. So in the manuscript, Dr. Manette has recorded that his imprisonment was at the hands of the Evermont brothers, that is Darnay's father and uncle. There he also records that Darnay's uncle had kidnapped and raped a peasant girl. The girl's brother at first hides his remaining younger sister. He died at the hands of his uncle. In spite of Dr. Manette's best efforts, both the elder sister and the brother died. Dr. Manette's manuscript thus has an ending for his aristocrat family. He says, them and their descendants to the last of their race. Reading this, De Fox, they consider this as a proof of Darnay's guilt and he is condemned to die by the guillotine the next afternoon. Guillotine is an apparatus which is designed to behead the criminal. Later in the De Fox wine shop, Sidney Carton discovers that Madame De Fox was the surviving sister of the peasant family. He also overhears her plan of denouncing both Lucie and her daughter. He then visits Laurie and warns him that Lucie and her family must ready to flee the next day. He then gets a promise from Laurie that the family will be waiting for him in the carriage at 2 p.m. So they are about to get ready to leave the very instant he returns. Carton, with the help of Bastille, he takes access to Darcy's prison cell. He also drugs Darnay and trades clothes with him. Then he asks Bastille to carry Darnay out to the carriage where Laurie and the family are expecting Carton. Then they flee to England with Darnay. Darnay gradually regains consciousness. Meanwhile, Madame De Fox, she moves to Lucie's lodgings, hoping to take hold of her and her daughter. There she finds Miss Pross. Miss Pross was actually waiting for Jerry so that they can follow the family out of Paris. Then the two women struggle and Madame De Fox's pistol discharges and that permanently deafens Miss Pross. And unfortunately, Madame De Fox dies out of drawing her own pistol. Now there is a change of the guilt person because in Charles' place, Carton is now at prison. When Carton is taken towards the guillotine, he promises to hold hands with a young seamstress. That seamstress was also wrongly accused. He then dies knowing that his sacrifice was the greatest thing that he's ever done. Let us see the themes of this novel. Tyranny and revolution. The novel is set in Paris during the French Revolution, which began in 1789. Dickens shows the tyranny of the French aristocracy, that is, high taxes, unjust law, and a complete disregard for the well-being of the poor, secrecy and surveillance. Here, Manette's letter discloses his secret life history. Next is fate and history. Sacrifice, the sacrifice that Carton did to Charles, imprisonment. Hope this video helps. If you have query, write it down on the comment section. Thank you for listening.